When you sent in these articles from Aeroflow Urology about autism and incontinence, it really got me thinking.
Yeah,
It's one of those things people don't really talk about, you know? And I
right.
was wondering, for you, is there a personal connection to this? Or is this just one of those intersections that
Uh,
most people probably don't even think about?
it's definitely something that needs more attention.
Yeah.
You're right. People don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
But incontinence is something that really can affect anyone.
Right.
And it's something that's actually surprisingly common in people with autism.
Surprisingly common, you say.
Yeah.
One of the articles mentioned a small study. I think it was teenagers with ASD, and 85% of them
Yeah.
experienced some form of incontinence.
Wow.
I mean, that number really stopped me in my tracks, I have to admit.
It's a big number.
It is. It is.
Yeah, definitely something that needs to be researched more. We need larger samples.
Yeah.
But it does highlight this is something that affects a lot of people in the autism community.
So let's break it down a little bit.
Okay.
Why is there even a connection between autism and incontinence in the first place?
Right.
The articles mention sensory sensitivities and that being a big factor. Can
Yeah.
you kind of unpack that a little for us?
Absolutely. So when we talk about sensory sensitivities with autism, we're talking about how people's brains process sensory information differently.
Okay.
So this could be anything from the feel of clothes on their skin to the sound of a toilet flushing. It can be anything.
And how does that specifically relate to incontinence?
So think about, for example, if a child is hypersensitive to tactile stimulation, the feeling of needing to urinate could be really overwhelming for them, or even painful,
Okay.
which could lead to them avoiding using the bathroom altogether.
That makes so much sense because it's not just about like recognizing the urge to go.
Right.
It's how that urge, how your body's processing that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you have people who are hyposensitive, so they have a decreased sensitivity
Okay.
to certain sensations. So they might not even register the feeling of a full bladder until it's too late.
Wow. So it's like it can manifest in completely opposite ways.
Exactly.
But both can lead to these challenges with incontinence.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's not even always just about the actual physical sensations, right?
Right.
Communication can be a huge factor too.
Yeah.
Because even if someone with autism, you know, they feel those signals in their body.
Yeah.
They might not be able to communicate, I need to use the bathroom, you know.
Exactly. Especially think about like a child who might rely on visual schedules to get through their day.
Right.
They might not have the language or the way to express that urgent need to use the bathroom,
Yeah.
especially if it falls outside of like their routine.
It's like a perfect storm of challenges.
Yeah.
You've got the sensory stuff, you've got the communication barriers,
Yes.
and then you layer on top of that the social and emotional impact, too, of having an accident.
You're right, because it's not just about having an accident.
Right.
It's the embarrassment, the anxiety, the fear of being judged and ostracized.
One of the articles, I think it was called Coping with Incontinence,
Yeah.
they shared a story about this person whose trip to Disney World
Right.
was totally overshadowed by this fear of having an accident.
It's heartbreaking, and it's so common, unfortunately, for people. You know,
Yeah.
imagine being at Disney World, which is already a lot for anybody.
So stimulating.
And especially if you have sensory processing differences,
Oh, my God.
and then you add on that anxiety of having an accident on top of it.
Yeah, it's a recipe for disaster.
Exactly. And it really highlights how important understanding and empathy
Oh,
and
absolutely.
support from the people around them is.
Speaking of support,
Yes.
the articles talked a lot about different ways to support people with autism and incontinence.
Right.
And starting at a really young age, actually.
Right.
What are some of the key takeaways there?
Well, early intervention is really important. And one of the most important things we can do is create a very safe and supportive environment
Oh.
where a child feels comfortable communicating their needs, whether that's verbally or through other means.
So open communication is really key there.
Absolutely.
Oh.
Structure and routine can be very, very helpful,
Okay.
especially for younger children.
Okay.
Establishing predictable bathroom breaks, even if they don't always result in success, can be really helpful.
So instead of just waiting for the child to tell us they need to go, we're kind of building it into the routine.
Exactly.
Okay.
And this is where those practical tips from Aeroflow's 8 ways to help your child with autism and incontinence really come in.
Oh, yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah.
I love that article. It felt very actionable, which I think is so important when you're feeling kind of lost. Let's dive into some of those tips, actually. I think that would be really helpful after a quick break. And we're back talking about autism and incontinence and how to best support kids who are dealing with both.
Yeah.
Before the break, we were talking about early intervention and support being so key.
Yes.
What about those, you mentioned 8 ways to help. What really spoke to you in that article?
One thing that I think is really important that people sometimes don't think about is visual aids.
Okay.
Because for a lot of people with autism, visual communication is going to be way more effective
Right.
than just telling them what to do.
So instead of saying, go to the bathroom, we could have like a visual schedule
Exactly.
that shows like bathroom breaks throughout the day.
Exactly. Or even a social story, like explaining what's going to happen step by step.
Yeah, that makes sense.
When they feel that urge to go.
Yeah, it's like making it kind of less abstract, right? More
Yeah.
concrete visual.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it really helps them know what to expect.
Yeah.
And that actually kind of ties into another one of the points in the article, being mindful of those sensory triggers.
Right, because as we were talking about before,
Yes.
those sensory sensitivities can be a huge part of why a child might be struggling with this in the first place.
Absolutely. So let's say a child is really bothered by the sound of a toilet flushing, right?
Yeah.
Something as simple as noise-canceling headphones can make a huge difference for them.
It's like these small adjustments.
Yeah.
But they can make such a difference in a kid's life.
Huge.
And I imagine in their success with toilet training, too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but what about when those kids get older? You know, the articles also talk about supporting teens and young adults.
Right. And this is where I think those conversations about incontinence can be even more difficult.
Yeah.
You know, teenagers have so much going on already.
Oh, absolutely.
All those social pressures, thinking about body image, who they are, and then you add in the stigma of incontinence.
It's a lot.
It's a lot, and it can really prevent them from getting the help that they need,
Right.
even from their parents or their doctors.
I thought that was really powerful in that Inconfidence article.
Yes.
Jesse's story about, just not being able to talk to anyone about this
Right.
is really, really, I think, unfortunately, really common.
Yeah, it is, and it's heartbreaking,
Yeah.
He talks about feeling like he's the only one going through this.
Right.
Like there's something wrong with him.
Of course.
And I think that feeling of isolation, it's only made worse by the financial burden that often comes along with managing incontinence.
That's the other thing I was thinking about, too, is that
Yeah.
the diaper divide article really opened my eyes to that. Like,
Yeah.
the actual financial reality here
It's huge.
of managing incontinence.
Yeah,
It's expensive.
it is. It is.
And we're not just talking about babies here.
No, this is teens, adults, seniors.
You know who needs these products.
Yes, absolutely. And the article talked about a study where almost 70% of people said they had a hard time affording incontinence supplies.
70%. That's wild. I mean,
It's huge.
what kind of an impact does that have on people's lives?
It's huge, Imagine having to choose between, like, buying groceries or buying incontinence products
Yeah.
for your child or even for yourself.
Right. It's like impossible.
Basic needs.
Yeah.
And you're having to sacrifice one for the other.
And it causes a lot of stress.
Yeah, it's, like you said, it's dehumanizing in a way.
Yeah.
And like you were saying, it can make that feeling of isolation even worse.
Absolutely. Because it's like you're dealing with the physical stuff, the emotional challenges of incontinence, and then you add the financial strain on top of it,
Yeah.
and often in silence.
It's like the secret shame that
Yeah.
people are carrying around.
And I think this is where we need to talk about like systemic change,
Okay. Yeah.
because individual support is essential,
Right.
but we also have to think about the bigger picture. Yeah, like what? Give us some examples.
Okay, well, a lot of insurance plans don't cover incontinence supplies.
Oh, really?
Or they have very limited coverage. And so that puts a huge burden on families.
Right.
Especially families who are already struggling financially.
So we're back, wrapping up this deep dive on autism and incontinence.
Yes.
And before the break, we were talking about the financial side of all of this.
Yeah.
Which sounds like a huge problem if you need those supplies.
It's a huge barrier.
And you're not covered.
Yeah. It creates the system where only the people who can afford it
Right.
can access the products that they need.
And it seems unfair.
It is.
Like you're being
It's
punished for something that's a medical condition.
Yeah, exactly.
So it makes me wonder, like, is there anything that can be done about that?
Yeah, I mean, the good news is awareness is growing.
Okay.
Organizations like Aeroflow Urology, they're advocating for policies to be changed
Okay.
to try to get insurance to cover these products.
Right, good.
They're trying to educate the public about this and healthcare providers too.
So that's encouraging.
Yes.
It sounds like there are people fighting the good fight, but
Yeah.
besides supporting organizations like that, what can we, like, as individuals do?
Yeah. I mean, Even small things can make a difference.
Okay.
I think, number one, talk about it.
Yeah.
Break the silence around this issue.
Yeah.
Share your story if you're comfortable.
Yeah.
Or just listen to somebody else who needs to talk.
It's about changing the conversation
Exactly.
from like a shameful secret thing
Yeah,
to
being open about it.
something where it's like, okay, this is a thing that happens. This is a medical condition. It's not something to be ashamed of.
Exactly, and we need to be advocates.
Yeah.
Especially for, people in our lives with autism
Yeah.
who are dealing with incontinence. We can talk to their schools about making bathrooms more sensory friendly.
Right.
We can learn more about the challenges that these families are facing.
Right. Because knowledge is power, as they say.
Absolutely.
The more we know,
Yeah.
the better we can support the people in our lives who are dealing with this.
And I think really what it comes down to is changing how we define success.
Okay.
It's not about making sure that accidents never happen.
Right.
It's about making sure that when they do,
Yeah.
that we're reacting with support and understanding, not judgment.
I love that. So it's not about fixing.
Yeah.
It's about accepting and supporting.
Exactly.
And it sounds like that starts with creating spaces
Yes.
where people with autism and incontinence feel safe
Yes.
to talk about their needs, to be their full selves, to access the support that they need
Absolutely.
to really thrive.
Yes.
So as we wrap up this deep dive today, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from this?
You're not alone.
Yeah.
There are people out there who understand what you're going through.
Yeah.
There are resources out there.
And there's hope
Yeah.
that things can get better.
Yeah.
And that, autism and incontinence, they don't have to be these shameful things. We can meet these challenges with compassion and support. I love that. And on that note, to our listeners, if this is something that you or someone you love is dealing with, please reach out. There are people out there who can help. You don't have to go through this alone.
You don't have to go through this alone.